Have you ever stopped to consider why some families seem doomed to financial struggle, generation after generation? Florence Scovel Shinn uncovered a profound truth. It's not about luck, it's not about capability, and it's certainly not about effort. It's about something far more profound, something most people don't even realize exists. Florence discovered what she called spiritual inheritances, energetic patterns passed down from parents to children, not through genes, but through words, beliefs, and unconscious decrees, repeated for generations. And she discovered something even more revolutionary. These inheritances can be broken in a matter of minutes, using a specific decree she developed after years of studying families trapped in cycles of poverty. Florence began investigating this in 1912, when a woman sought her help in a desperate situation. A woman named Emily, intelligent, hardworking, doing everything right, yet unable to escape financial struggle. And what anguished her most was seeing that her children, even as young children, were already showing signs of the same scarcity mindset. Emily said something that made Florence realize she was facing something far greater. My grandmother always said our family wasn't born to have money. My mother repeated the same thing, and now I find myself saying it to my children. Florence immediately understood what was happening. Emily wasn't just dealing with her own financial limitations. She was carrying the limitations of all the women in her family who came before her. Family decrees, Florence called them. Phrases repeated so frequently within a family that they become spiritual laws governing the lives of all members. Florence asked Emily, "What phrases about money have you heard your entire life in your family?" Emily's response was devastating. Money doesn't grow on trees. Other families are the rich ones, poor but honest. Money doesn't buy happiness. Hard work is a virtue. Wealth is a sin. Florence realized that Emily didn't just need to change her relationship with money. She needed to literally break decades, perhaps centuries, of negative family programming. And that's when Florence developed what she called the Family Liberation Decree. A specific set of words that, when spoken with authority and conviction, could break these spiritual chains that kept entire families bound to poverty. But Florence knew that simply creating a decree wasn't enough. She needed to understand exactly how these spiritual inheritances worked in order to break them definitively. For months, Florence studied over 50 families trapped in patterns of scarcity. And she discovered something fascinating. In all of them, there was what she called a moment of origin of the curse. It was always a moment of extreme financial trauma, usually several generations back, where someone in the family had made a powerful oath or declaration in pain. Things like, "I'll never trust money again," "Rich only by exploiting others," "Our family doesn't deserve abundance." These declarations, made in moments of intense emotion and pain, became unconscious decrees that governed all subsequent generations. Florence discovered that the Liberation Decree needed 3 specific components: recognition of the negative inheritance, conscious rejection of that inheritance, and a declaration of a new spiritual lineage of abundance. When Florence taught the decree to Emily, something extraordinary happened. Emily reported that, for the first time in her life, she felt truly free to think about money without guilt or fear. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. But the practical results were even more impressive. In 3 weeks, Emily received a job offer that paid 40% more than her previous salary. In 2 months, she had paid off debts that had plagued her for years And in 6 months, for the first time in her life, she had money saved. But perhaps the most incredible thing was the change in Emily's children. Without her saying anything to them about the decree, they began to manifest a completely different relationship with money. They began to talk about dreams of abundance, to have creative ideas to make money, to demonstrate a natural confidence with financial matters. Florence realized that when you break a negative spiritual inheritance, you don't just liberate yourself, you liberate all the generations that come after you. Emily's case spread, and other people began seeking Florence out with similar situations. And in each case, Florence identified the same patterns: entire families governed by unconscious decrees of financial limitation. One of Florence's most surprising discoveries was that the person who broke the family curse was often not the one who suffered the most financially in the family. It was simply the person who was spiritually ready to take responsibility for liberating the entire lineage. Florence began to teach that breaking a family's inheritance of poverty is an act of service not only for yourself, but for your ancestors and for all descendants who will come after. When you break a spiritual chain, Florence wrote, you liberate the past and protect the future. But Florence discovered that the decree alone wasn't enough. It also required what she called a disconnection ritual, a specific process to literally cut the energetic threads that connected the person to the family's limiting patterns. The ritual involved 3 steps. First, the person had to list in writing all the negative decrees about money they had heard in the family. Second, burn that list while reciting the liberation decree. And third, plant a seed in the earth as a symbol of the new lineage of abundance that was beginning. Florence tested this complete protocol with dozens of people, and the results were consistently transformative, not only in people's financial lives, but in the entire family dynamic. One woman reported that after she did the ritual, her father, who was extremely resistant to talking about money, spontaneously began sharing investment ideas with her. Another said that siblings who destructively competed for resources began collaborating on financial projects. Florence realized she was messing with very deep spiritual laws. A family, she wrote, is an energetic system. When you consciously change one point of the system, the entire system reorganizes itself. But perhaps Florence's most revolutionary discovery was about timing. She discovered that there are specific moments in a person's life where they have maximum power to break free from negative family inheritances. These moments usually occur during extreme financial crises: the birth of children, the death of parents, or drastic life changes. These are moments, Florence explained, where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds thins, and our ability to decree change multiplies. If you're going through such a moment now, Florence would say it's no coincidence this information has reached you. The universe is giving you a unique opportunity to break patterns that may have been governing your family for generations. Florence always emphasized that breaking a family inheritance of poverty isn't about becoming rich overnight. It's about liberating yourself and your lineage from limitations that don't belong to you. It's about giving your children and grandchildren the freedom to create their own relationship with abundance without carrying the weight of financial failures that weren't even theirs. And now I'm going to teach you the exact decree Florence developed. The same one that liberated hundreds of people from family patterns of scarcity. The same one that can break chains that may have been limiting your family for decades. But before revealing the decree, Florence discovered something crucial about how family inheritances of poverty really work. She realized there are 3 different types of chains that keep families trapped in scarcity. The first chain, Florence called blood decrees. These are statements made by ancestors during moments of extreme financial trauma that became spiritual laws for the entire lineage. Florence discovered these decrees held such power because they were made in the presence of intense emotional pain. The second chain was limiting rituals. These are behaviors that repeat themselves generation after generation, always related to money. Things like hiding money in unusual places out of fear, obsessively counting and recounting coins, or always talking about money in whispers, as if it were something shameful. The third chain, the most subtle but perhaps the most powerful, Florence called scarcity identity. This is when being poor becomes part of the family identity. When the family prides itself on its simplicity, its struggle, its ability to survive on little. It seems positive. But Florence discovered that this pride in poverty creates an unconscious resistance to abundance. Florence realized that to completely break a family inheritance of poverty, it was necessary to cut the 3 chains simultaneously. And this required a very specific decree, one that addressed each of these dimensions. The decree Florence developed has 7 distinct parts, and each part has a specific function in the process of liberation. Florence always emphasized that the words must be spoken exactly as she taught, because each word was chosen for its specific vibrational power. The first part of the decree is the acknowledgement of inheritance. You must say, I acknowledge that I carry within me patterns of financial limitation that did not originate in me, but were transmitted through my family lineage. Florence explained that this acknowledgement is crucial because many people try to break financial patterns without admitting they came from outside. You can't liberate what you don't acknowledge you're carrying, she said. The second part is the conscious rejection. You must pronounce with authority, I consciously reject all decrees of limitation, scarcity, and poverty that were pronounced by my ancestors. These words no longer have power over me or my descendants. Florence discovered that the word, consciously, was fundamental here, because many of the family decrees were accepted unconsciously over the years. Conscious rejection breaks this automatism. The third part Florence called the spiritual severing. The exact words are, I now cut all energetic cords that connect me to the patterns of scarcity in my family. I am free to create my own relationship with abundance. Florence taught that you should literally visualize cords being cut as you pronounce these words. She believed that visualization dramatically enhanced the power of the decree. The fourth part is the declaration of authority. You must decree with total conviction, I declare my spiritual authority over my financial life. No family pattern from the past can govern my future. This part, according to Florence, establishes you as the ultimate authority over your own financial life, regardless of what happened in previous generations. The fifth part, Florence considered the most powerful, the invocation of divine inheritance. The words are, I invoke my true inheritance, which is the infinite abundance of the universe. This is my rightful inheritance as a child of the Creator. Florence explained that this part of the decree connects you with a spiritual lineage higher than your biological lineage. Your true inheritance, she said, doesn't come from your earthly parents. It comes from your Heavenly Father. The sixth part is the blessing of the lineage. You must say, I bless my ancestors and free them from their own patterns of limitation. May this liberation extend backward and forward in my lineage. Florence discovered that it was important to bless the ancestors, not to curse them, because often they themselves were victims of patterns they inherited from even older generations. The seventh and final part is the seal of abundance. The final words are, "I seal this declaration with anticipatory gratitude for all the abundance that is now free to flow into my life. So be it. It is done." Florence always emphasized that the words, "it is done," were essential because they declare that the change has already happened on the spiritual plane, even before manifesting on the physical plane. But Florence discovered that simply pronouncing the decree wasn't enough. It also required what she called an anchoring ritual, a physical process that helped to fix the new programming in the subconscious. The anchoring ritual that Florence developed is simple, but powerful. You must perform the decree at sunrise, preferably outdoors, holding a coin in your right hand. The coin represents your new relationship with money. After pronouncing the complete decree, you must bury the coin in the earth, symbolizing that you are planting a new seed of abundance for your lineage. Florence discovered that this physical act dramatically enhanced the results of the decree. Florence also discovered that certain dates of the year were especially powerful for performing this ritual. Dates she called family liberation portals. The most potent times to perform this are the first day of each season, a new moon, and the anniversary of the death of your parents or grandparents. One of Florence's most fascinating discoveries was that the decree worked better when performed by women. She observed that women possess a naturally stronger connection to familial energies, and therefore a greater power to transform them. But Florence also taught a special version of the decree for men, because she discovered that patterns of financial limitation were transmitted in slightly different ways through male and female lineages. Florence began documenting the results of people applying the complete decree, including the anchoring ritual. And the patterns she found were astounding. In 90% of cases, people reported immediate changes in their emotional relationship with money. Guilt, fear, and feelings of unworthiness disappeared. In 70% of cases, concrete financial opportunities appeared within 30 days. And in 50% of cases, other family members began manifesting positive changes in their finances without even knowing the decree had been performed. But perhaps the most impressive results were with the children of those who performed the decree. Florence observed that children whose parents had broken free from inherited family poverty manifested a natural abundance mindset from a very young age, as if they were born free from these limitations. Florence realized she had discovered something revolutionary, not just a method for improving individual financial lives, but a way to heal entire family lineages, liberating both the past and the future. When you break a legacy of poverty, Florence wrote in her final journals, you're not just changing your life, you're healing your ancestry and protecting your descendants. It's an act of love that extends through time. Florence always said that people ready to break family legacies receive clear signs from the universe. Feeling a deep resonance with this information, if something inside you is recognizing truths you've always known, but never been able to articulate, that's the sign. Florence profoundly believed in spiritual generosity as a way to keep the flow of abundance open. If these revelations are touching your soul, if you feel gratitude for receiving this knowledge precisely when you needed it, she would tell you to honor that feeling through a super thanks. It's not about the monetary value. It's about expressing gratitude for for the channel that allowed this information to reach you. And Florence discovered that expressed gratitude creates a portal that allows more abundance to enter your life. Now, the complete decree that can free your family from patterns of scarcity that may have existed for generations. I acknowledge that I carry within me patterns of financial limitation that did not originate with me, but were transmitted through my family lineage. I consciously reject all decrees of limitation, scarcity, and poverty that were pronounced by my ancestors. These words no longer hold power over me or my descendants. I now sever all energetic cords that connect me to my family's patterns of scarcity. I am free to create my own relationship with abundance. I declare my spiritual authority over my financial life. No family pattern from the past can govern my future. I invoke my true inheritance, which is the infinite abundance of the universe. This is my rightful inheritance as a child of the Creator. I bless my ancestors and release them from their own patterns of limitation. May this liberation extend backward and forward in my lineage. I seal this declaration with gratitude in advance for all the abundance that is now free to flow into my life. So be it. It is done. Remember, Florence always said that this decree should be pronounced with total authority, as if you were a king declaring a law in your kingdom. Because that's exactly what you're doing. You are decreeing a new spiritual law for your lineage. But Florence discovered even more fascinating aspects of breaking inherited family poverty. She noticed that there were confirmation signs the universe sent to show that the decree was indeed working. The first sign, appearing in almost 100% of cases, was what Florence called dreams of liberation. People who performed the decree reported very vivid dreams, where they saw themselves literally breaking chains, opening locked doors, or receiving golden keys from luminous figures. Florence interpreted these dreams as confirmation that this spiritual work was being done. The subconscious, she explained, processes liberation through dreams before manifesting it in physical life. The second sign was financial synchronicities. Within 72 hours of performing the decree, people began noticing strange coincidences related to money. They found coins in unusual places, received unexpected offers, or overheard conversations about financial opportunities at perfect moments. Florence taught that these synchronicities were the universe reorganizing circumstances to create channels of abundance that were previously blocked by family patterns. The third sign, perhaps the most impressive, was spontaneous family changes. Other family members, without knowing the decree had been performed, began making different financial decisions, talking about money more positively, or even having insights about investments or business opportunities. Florence discovered that this happened because families function as interconnected energetic systems. When one person consciously breaks a pattern, the entire family system automatically reorganizes. But Florence also identified signs of resistance that could appear in the first few days after the decree. These were indications that the old patterns were fighting to maintain themselves. The most common sign of resistance was what Florence called the abundance test. Situations where the person was tempted to revert to old financial behaviors. Things like spending money out of fear of having it, hiding resources, or rejecting opportunities because they felt they didn't deserve them. Florence always advised that these tests were actually confirmations that the decree was working. The old pattern, she said, always struggles before it dies. When you see resistance, know that liberation is happening. Florence also discovered that certain family members might react negatively when someone breaks legacies of poverty, especially older people who had strongly identified with the family's financial struggles. Some people, Florence observed, prefer to remain blind alongside their family rather than see clearly on their own. She taught that these reactions shouldn't discourage the individual undertaking the work of liberation. One of Florence's most surprising discoveries concerned what happened to people's physical money after they made the decree. She documented cases where people found forgotten money, received long overdue payments they'd almost forgotten about, or uncovered old investments that had unexpectedly appreciated. Florence believed this occurred because the decree not only changed a person's ability to attract new money, but also unlocked resources that already existed, but were trapped by patterns of scarcity. Florence also developed complementary techniques to amplify the effects of the decree. One of the most powerful was what she called physical cleansing of scarcity symbols. This technique involved identifying objects in the house that represented or reminded them of the family's financial struggles, and deliberately replacing them with symbols of abundance, things like trading old, worn wallets for new ones, replacing empty jars with jars containing coins, or placing green plants in areas where broken items had previously been. Florence discovered that these physical changes help the subconscious mind more readily accept the new programming of abundance. Another powerful technique Florence developed was the daily maintenance decree. After making the main family liberation decree, the person should make a smaller decree every day for 21 consecutive days. The daily decree was, "I am grateful for being free from my family's patterns of scarcity. I allow abundance to flow freely into my life today." Florence discovered that this daily repetition helped to permanently fix the new programming, preventing the old patterns from trying to re-establish themselves. Florence also observed that people who broke free from inherited family poverty often developed financial skills they'd never possessed before. They began to understand investments, gain insights into business opportunities, or manifest creativity to generate income in unexpected ways. When you remove the spiritual blockages, Florence explained, your natural intelligence for abundance can finally flourish. One of Florence's last discoveries was about the power of making the decree in a group, especially with other family members open to this transformation. She organized several sessions where siblings or cousins made the decree together and discovered that the results were exponentially more powerful. When several people from the same lineage broke the patterns simultaneously, it created a wave of liberation that extended to the entire family tree. Florence documented cases where, after a group session, even distant aunts and uncles who didn't even know about the ceremony began to report unexpected financial improvements. But Florence always emphasized that even one person alone had enough power to liberate an entire lineage. "A strong link," she said, "can support an entire chain, and a conscious link can liberate all the others." Florence believed that people born into families with patterns of scarcity often chose that experience spiritually to have the opportunity to break those patterns and heal the lineage. "You are not a victim of family poverty," she wrote. "You are the chosen healer to transform it." This perspective gave people a sense of purpose and power instead of victimhood. They understood they were doing important spiritual work not only for themselves, but for their entire ancestry. Florence always ended her sessions on family inheritances by reminding people that breaking patterns of scarcity wasn't about becoming materially rich, although that often happened as a consequence. It was about liberating the family lineage so that each person could fully express their gifts and talents without the weight of limitations that didn't belong to them. Abundance, Florence said, isn't about having a lot of money. It's about having total freedom to be who you truly are. If you've come this far and feel a deep certainty that you need to do this work, if something inside you is shouting that the time has come to break patterns that have lasted too long, Florence would say your soul already knows you are the chosen one of your lineage to make this transformation. And if you feel gratitude for having received this information, if you recognize that it came to you at exactly the right moment, remember what Florence always taught: expressed gratitude multiplies blessings. Super thanks is a simple way to honor the spiritual value of what you've received, and to keep open the channel through which more revelations can reach you. Florence discovered that people who express gratitude for the spiritual knowledge they receive create a magnetic field that attracts even more wisdom and opportunities for growth. And now tell me in the comments, how many generations of your family do you know who have struggled financially? Florence would say that this answer reveals exactly how deep the inheritance is that you are ready to break.